Hello. Today's date is November 5th, 2017, and my name is Will Greer, and I am interviewing Ben Greer for the Women's March Oral History Project. For the purposes of this interview, I will refer to Ben Greer as Dad. So, how are you doing?
I'm all right. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. So we will start with some background biographical information, if you don't mind. So what year were you born?
1940,
Okay, and where were you born?
Knoxville, Tennessee.
So how did you end up in Atlanta between then and growing up in Knoxville?
Well, I went to law school here in the 1960s, and then for a period of time after I graduated, I practiced with a firm in New York and in Paris for that same firm. And then we came back here in 1974 and have been in Atlanta ever since.
All right. So how would you describe growing up, how would you describe your family's political leanings?
Oh, goodness. Well, my father was a staunch Scots-Irish Republican, East Tennessee and Appalachian Republican, and that meant that strain of republicanism was isolationist, and people just wanted to be left alone, and so they felt that government should not do for people anything. And my grandfather, for example, the family legend was that he refused to accept Social Security when it came out because he thought that was socialism. So, oh goodness, sorry.
That's all right.
I've lost all my pictures here. I have to scroll through this again. But anyway, so my parents were Republicans. Having said that, they were not. Neither one was racist, and we were taught that segregation was bad, or more from my mother than my father, and that they were socially moderate, we'll put it that way. They weren't like Jim Crow Southern Democrats.
Well, what did they think of Brown v. Board?
Oh, well, I don't know that I discussed that with my father. My mother thought that was a correct decision.
And how about your own political leanings? How would you describe them?
I would describe myself as a center-left Democrat.
Okay, and what does that mean?
Well, I didn't vote for Bernie Sanders. I have always felt very strongly that our Constitution should protect everybody equally, and I feel in general that the government should play a role in making lives better for people. As you get older, you worry about the fiscal stability and soundness of the government, so government programs should not be undertaken without those considerations in mind. But basically, I'm what people would call a moderate liberal, or moderate to liberal.
Okay. And in the past, how would you describe your political activity?
Well, I felt very strongly that the Vietnam War was a terrible mistake, and when I was in New York, was active with lawyer groups that were campaigning to persuade the government to cease our military involvement in Vietnam. And after that, after I went to Paris, I worked first for Edmund Muskie's political campaign, and when he dropped out, then worked for George McGovern in the 1972 campaign, and ended up being co-chair of the Democratic Party in France when we were there. Since then, coming back to Atlanta, we have been active in supporting candidates. I used to raise money. We used to raise money for candidates, but I've never been active beyond that.
What candidates did you raise money for?
Well, mainly local candidates. Although we did give to some national candidates, John Kerry and Barack Obama. But locally, it's not as much ideological as it is just supporting people whose heart was in the right place, let me put it that way. We did support a candidate who was running against Newt Gingrich and nearly beat him when he was in Congress. But mainly locally, city council, school board, things like that. And these are just people we know and liked and felt were qualified for the job.
Okay. Real quick, what would you describe as your profession?
Well, I'm a lawyer.
All right. Just
That's real quick.
Yeah. I mean, if there's anything else you'd want to add about that, of course, then.
No, I was always almost, before I went to law school, I almost went into the Foreign Service. And because when I did my military, I was in Germany and got very interested in international affairs. And as I said, I almost went into the Foreign Service, but decided to go on and get a professional degree. But in my professional life, I've been able to combine my interest in international affairs and with the legal practice. I've been very successful with that and very, very happy with it.
All right. So why did you decide to march on January 21st?
Well, we didn't like Donald Trump at all, and we thought it was a terrible mistake that he was elected, and that it was important that people make an immediate statement. That, especially, we were in France at the time, and we felt that it was important for people to know that there are significant forces in the United States that stood for what America has traditionally stood for in international affairs.
And what is that?
Well, I think if you look at the post-war era, the U.S. and its allies have created structures, security, financial, and commercial, that have served the world very well. And when I say structures, I'm referring to the international organizations, starting with the UN, the General Agreement on Trade and Services, the International Monetary Fund, and for security, the series of alliances that the U.S. has around the world, principally NATO, but there are other alliances as well. And I think if you look back over the last 75 years, that has served the world very well, and should not be cast aside willy-nilly, which is what Trump has advocated. Withdrawal from trade agreements and sort of pulling back from NATO, withdrawal from multilateral arrangements like the Paris Climate Accords, all those things. In a global age, all these things have to be, no one country can do it all, and these things have to be approached on a multilateral basis. And there's nothing in the historical record that would suggest that, notwithstanding some of the mistakes that we've made, the world is not a better place because of the efforts that we have made, we along with our allies have made to establish these structures.
Okay. So you were in France at the time, so which march did you attend?
Well, it was right after the inauguration on the Saturday, I think. When was he inaugurated? The 20th?
The 20th,
so I think
yeah.
It was the 21st. And we were in touch with a friend in Paris who said she didn't know for sure that whether or not there would be a march. It was obviously from the news that marches were planned all around in various cities in the U.S. and elsewhere. And our friend said that she had seen on Facebook that there would be some kind of a gathering on a place called the Trocadero, which is in Paris across the Seine River from the Eiffel Tower, and at a certain hour, I think it was 2 in the afternoon. And we weren't sure how many people would show up, but we agreed to meet our friend there, and were quite surprised to find that thousands of people showed up, even though there was no formal notice of the march in Paris. There were groups that organized in London and other cities outside the U.S. The marches were better organized, but this was truly spontaneous and word of mouth.
Well, you've talked about an issue that's, the chief issue that was really important to you. Would you say that was accurate?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't, well, like the only other marches that we participated in were marches against the Vietnam War years ago. This wasn't like that. This was a reaffirmation, or at least my interpretation of it was just a reaffirmation of traditional American values and a confirmation that not everybody believed in Trump's unilateralist view of foreign policy and his domestic program. So, and we were out there just to demonstrate that.
Okay. So, what other issues did you see represented at the march?
Well, there were lots of signs. Some of them very funny. Others serious. There were signs about immigration. There were signs. I'm looking at the camera now. Well, resist Republican kleptocracy is that one. Let's see what else we got. I don't know if I should put this one on the record.
If you want to, that's entirely your choice.
It's whose pussy would Jesus grab? This is just sort of a general statement.
Right.
There were lots of signs like that. Here's another one, pussy grabs back. A lot of the women were wearing the pink hats. And then, as I said, some of them were very funny. This one says, "This sentient Cheeto is not my president." And here's one that says, "Proud feminist, proud immigrant, and daughter of refugees." And here's one in French that says, "Encore feminist," still feminist, I guess.
Okay.
So lots of different sides. There was one that I didn't take a picture of, but that's from a woman from the Dominican Republic who was marching against, who was marching in favor of abortion, and she said, "Abortion is illegal in the Dominican Republic. Why am I here?" But anyway, so there are a lot of signs and slogans that you would normally associate with a liberal, a liberal gathering.
So, how did you personally feel about those issues?
Oh well, generally, I think immigration has benefited the United States enormously, and we should enforce our immigration laws, but we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And by building walls and by treating the dreamers unfairly, and abortion. I'm pro-choice, and certainly am in favor of American engagement and leadership internationally, and so all of those sentiments were. In terms of our own motivation for being there, that they were an important reason we were there. As I said, it was we felt that it was important for Americans to stand up, and the crowd was some of the people in the crowd were not American, but the majority of the people were, and it was important for people to stand up and say, no, we don't agree with this.
So did you have expectations of what you thought the march would be like before you got there, or did you?
No, we had no idea what was going to be. We didn't even know if anybody would show up, and it was quite surprising that in the end so many people did.
So personally, what were you hoping to get out of the experience?
Oh, just to show that we were there, to stand up and be counted, as it were.
Okay. So, how about your friends and family? How did they react to the fact that you marched?
Well, I think they were just everybody I know in our family marched, our immediate family
That is
in
true.
Philadelphia and at Atlanta. I'm very proud to say that. So we're all on the same page.
How did you are you friends are do you have friends with different political leanings
I
or?
did, and I have some of these funny signs I forwarded to them, and they enjoyed the humor in the signs. And they all pretty much know where we stand on political things. So I didn't get a lot of feedback or blowback from that.
Okay. So, who was the group you marched with? You said it was my mother, but also there were two other people, I think you said, or?
No, there was one other, and I think there was a fourth person who was with our friend, her name
Oh,
was
okay.
Bess. She's Grace Gonzalezski's sister,
Okay.
Bess, and I think there was one. I forget her name. I think there was one other, and then the other people who were there. Just as I said, it was word of mouth, and we didn't stay for the. We had to march. We marched. We met at the Trocadero and marched across the river and gathered at the foot of the Eiffel Tower. And at that point, your mother and I left.
Okay.
And there were speeches. I don't know. I don't remember who gave the speeches. We felt that well, we had something else to do, and we felt that our numbers had. We'd shown that our solidarity with the movement, but just by showing up for the march.
So, what did you see at the time during your march? I mean, how would you describe the fellow marchers around you?
Well, it was we made the there was just, it was kind of a feel good thing. Everybody was there was a very good feeling about it. People felt that they were doing the right thing, and there was I don't know what your experience was here in Atlanta, but there was not a I don't know what the right word is. There was not a militancy about it. It was although clearly everybody knew why we were there and what we were trying to say, but it was not an in your face, fist in the air atmosphere. It was almost a festival atmosphere, and it was nice, but at the same time, and we said, well, you'd never get a group of Trump supporters smiling and enjoying themselves the way we are. But I don't think that's enough to do, to say, all right, we did this now. Go home because this is going to be if we're going to repair the damage that Mr. Trump and his crowd have done, it's going to take more than just marching. But I think the marching just to show that large numbers of people disagree with the policies of the administration. I think that's very important.
Well, how did you guys travel to the march?
We drove into Paris and then
Okay.
we took the metro from where we were staying with a friend.
What was it like on the metro on the way?
I don't have a recollection of that. I mean, I don't think there were very many people going to the march on the metro, but I don't remember.
So, were there any chants during the march?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. What were people saying?
Well, we were just talking to each other and looking at the signs
Okay.
and enjoying the weather. It was a beautiful day, and just I mean, there was a lot of human contact, and so that was the main thing. There were no chants.
Okay. Well, how
But,
about?
no, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I don't remember. I have chants where people were actually saying, things that were said in some of the Vietnam marches that we were in.
Okay. Did you see any law enforcement?
Yeah, there were, but they were not. They were very friendly, and they were not. I mean, this was not a violent mob. This was a. So it was all good with the police, and there were not, as you often see these days in Paris, soldiers who are with protective gear and submachine guns. It was not like that. These were just ordinary police.
What is that about? Why are
about terrorism?
Oh,
and,
okay.
So they didn't put us in that category.
Okay.
And I suspect that many more people than they thought would show up actually showed up, so they didn't sort of plan on as big a crowd as we had, which would have accounted for the low visibility of the police. But there were the atmosphere was very cordial with the police. They were smiling along with us.
Interesting. Well, how about opposition protesters?
There were none that I know of.
And about coverage of the march in the media that you saw, what did you think of that?
I don't remember any media coverage. There must have been some. But, I mean, I don't remember seeing television cameras. I mean, obviously there were a lot of people like your mother and me with our phones out taking pictures, but there must have been media coverage, but if there was, I didn't see it.
And what sort of media coverage of the march did you see afterwards?
I didn't see any of France.
Okay.
I mean, we saw actually in the newspapers, American newspaper, we saw, and on the internet, we saw, articles about the other marches around the world.
Okay.
And they were everywhere.
So did your group stay together the whole time?
Mm-hmm.
How did y'all manage to do that?
But it was easy to do. I mean, you just walk with the crowd and make sure that, it was a very slow walk. And,
okay.
And we were not, there were comfortable spaces between the people as we walked. So it was an easy matter to stay together.
Okay. Were there any other moments that stood out to you?
No, not really. It was, as I say, it was a nice statement to make. It was not the only thing that you're going to do if you want to make sure that America's traditional role is going to be preserved. But no, it was a good thing to do.
So what sort of things do you think need to be done? If marching is not the only thing to do.
Political organization, and I mean, we're seeing that. I kind of think the Democrats have not shown that they've got the kind of leadership that's going to be necessary. This is going to be a hard fight next year. But I don't think you're going to be able to do anything with Republican majorities in both houses of Congress. And so that means that we have to work hard next time to win at least one of the houses back.
You mean in 2018?
Yeah, 2018, yes. And then maybe we can look at other measures. Of course, we don't know in the meantime what's going to happen with the Russia probe, and that might chip away at his support. But it's pretty clear that very few Republicans in Congress are willing to stand up to him, and that's distressing.
So, have you done any sort of political engagement or anything like that?
No, we haven't done that since I retired, basically, except for the 2008, and we did work for Obama, and we gave the maximum that we could. But I had outside income then. I don't have that anymore, so I don't really give much. We don't really give much money to political candidates. The only contribution we've made recently is to Jennifer Ide, a woman who's running for city council, and she is the daughter. She was moved by Trump's election to become involved herself in local politics, and we know her parents, and so we made a contribution to her campaign.
Okay.
But no, we don't do that anymore. We used to do it a lot more than we do now.
So, what do you hope will happen? What are you hoping to see?
Well, I'm hoping that we can avoid a constitutional crisis, but I think we might have one when Trump begins to push back against what I think is almost certain will eventually be found by the Mueller probe and their investigation. I think Trump has been up to his eyeballs for a long time with a lot of very sleazy characters, many of whom are Russian oligarchs, and he's been not just collusion in the 1916 or 2016 election, but they've been investing with him for a long time. And I think that's going to be, when that stuff begins to come out, he's going to push back. And hopefully it will be, I don't know when all that's going to happen. And if in the absence of congressional majorities, in at least for the Democrats in at least one of the houses of Congress, then it's going to be difficult to impeach him. But I think he's a disaster, and I think he's been involved in questionable activities, probably criminal activities, for a long time, and I think that's going to unfold over in the coming months, and we'll just have to. I hope we can avoid a constitutional crisis in finding a way to get to change regimes, if you will.
Okay. Well, I just have one more question, really, which is, what would your advice be for anyone who is considering going to a march in the future?
Well, by all means, do it. Sure. I don't mistake that for the kind of political actions that's necessary to bring about change. Because the numbers of people who march, that strength in numbers has to be translated to strength at the ballot box in order for things to get done. So, but by all means, go march, yes.
All right. And we are at the end. Is there anything else you'd want to add? Or?
No, thank you. I've enjoyed this. Good luck.
All right.
And, yeah.
Well, I appreciate your time. Thanks.
Not at all.